Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The wind howled over the black cliffs of Dragonstone, carrying with it the salt of the sea and the sulfur of the mountain. Beneath a sky veiled in ash, the fortress loomed like a crown of shadow upon the smoking island. Its towers were carved from the rock of the volcano itself, dragons' heads and wings jutting from every parapet, as though the stone itself had been shaped by fire and fear. In that grim place, on the eve of war, a boy dreamed of dragons. Lionel Velaryon was no knight, though he bore the name of lords. He was a bastard, the son of a driftmark sailor and a kitchen maid who died bringing him into the world. Yet he had his father's hair, pale as moonlight, and the violet eyes of old Valyria. Some whispered that the blood of dragons ran through him, thin though it might be. Others said he was cursed, for all bastards of Dragonstone bore that fate in the end. The halls of the fortress were restless in those days. The death of King Viserys had split the realm in two, those who stood with Queen Rhaenyra, and those who named Aegon her usurper. Whispers of war stirred the island like storm winds, and every dragon keeper, every squire, every servant held their breath when the great beasts screamed from the mountain above. It was said that dragons felt men's fear and answered it in kind. Lionel worked in the stables by day and slept by the hearth by night, dreaming of wings and fire. He watched the dragon seeds come and go. Bastards and squires called to claim their dragons, to prove themselves worthy to ride. Some came back burned, their faces blackened like coal. Others never returned at all. Yet still, Lionel dreamed. He had seen dragons up close once. When the queen's son, Prince Joffrey, rode Syrax along the cliffs, Lionel had been mending harnesses nearby. The shadow that passed overhead blotted out the sun. The heat from her wings washed over him like the breath of a forge, and in that instant, he swore his heart had been set aflame. But when the keepers spoke of Cannibal, even the boldest men grew silent. Cannibal was older than memory, older than Dragonstone itself, some said. A black worm vast as a castle, whose scales were darker than night, and whose eyes burned green as wildfire. It was he who had hunted the hatchlings, devoured the unclaimed, and even feasted upon his own kin. He had never known saddle nor rider, never bowed to man or queen. The old dragon keepers called him the Devourer of Dragons. No man had dared to seek him in 100 years. Yet Lionel, standing barefoot in the cinder sand beneath the mountain's shadow, felt something stir within him whenever he heard that name. Cannibal. The word itself seemed to awaken some ancient hunger inside him, a whisper that said, "You are not meant to crawl when you could soar." One evening, as the sea mists rolled across the island and the air thrummed with distant roars, Lionel found himself wandering toward the mountain path. The fires of Dragonmont flickered red above, casting long tongues of flame against the smoke-choked sky. There, at the mouth of a tunnel, an old man stood, bent and thin as a dying branch, wrapped in a cloak the color of ash. His face was marked with the scars of burns long healed. In his hands, he held a lantern that burned with green flame. "Careful where your feet carry you, boy," the man rasped. "That road ends where men end." Lionel bowed his head. "I seek no trouble, sir, only to see." "To see what?" "The dragons," Lionel whispered. The man gave a mirthless chuckle. "Dragons, is it? You have the eyes of one who would ride, though you wear the rags of a stable hand. Tell me, have you no fear of being eaten?" "Every man fears something," Lionel said quietly. "But better to be devoured by a dragon than live forever on the ground." The man studied him for a long moment, and then his cracked lips curved into a smile that was not entirely kind. "You speak like a fool, or a Targaryen." He turned, gesturing toward the dark tunnel that led into the heart of Dragonmont. "If your courage lasts, follow. There's more to fear beneath the mountain than fire." The air grew hotter as they descended. Sulfur stung Lionel's nose, and rivulets of molten stone glimmered between cracks in the floor. He could hear the deep, thrumming growl of dragons beyond the walls, alive, vast, and restless. The old man led him through twisting corridors, where bones the size of ships lay half buried in the ash. When at last they reached a wide cavern, Lionel's breath caught. Before him lay a nest unlike any other, not of straw or hay, but of charred bones and melted steel. The cavern walls were scorched black, and the air shimmered with heat. At its center rested an enormous shape, curled like a shadow-given flesh. Two eyes opened, slow and gleaming, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Cannibal. The beast's scales were jagged as obsidian, his wings torn in places from battles long past. His breath came out in slow, smoking gusts, and when his head rose, the air itself seemed to retreat. Lionel could not move. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but his heart beat not with terror, but awe. The old man's voice came softly beside him. "You wished to see. Now you have seen. The question is, will he see you?" Cannibal's gaze fell upon the boy, green fire glinting in the dark. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the dragon's lips parted, revealing rows of teeth slick with blood and ash. Lionel felt the mountain tremble and realized the devourer of dragons was laughing. The sound rolled through the cavern like thunder, ancient and terrible. And Lionel Velaryon, bastard of Driftmark, knew that his life would never again belong to the earth. The mountain never truly slept. Even when night wrapped Dragonstone in fog, the heart of Dragonmont pulsed with slow crimson light, as if the island itself were alive. Deep in its belly, where the air shimmered with heat and the walls wept fire, Lionel Velaryon stood trembling before the black worm. Cannibal's laughter faded into a growl that shook the bones in his chest. The dragon's great head sank low, eyes like molten emeralds fixed upon him. Smoke drifted from its nostrils. The scent of scorched stone and death filled the cavern. "Do not move," murmured the old man beside him. "To move is to die." Lionel dared not even breathe. His eyes watered from the heat. His skin burned from the radiance that poured off the dragon's scales. Cannibal's tongue flicked out, a whip of flame-edged flesh that brushed the air inches from Lionel's face. He could feel the breath of the beast, heavy and hot as the forge fires of Driftmark. At last, Cannibal drew back, his monstrous head tilting as if in thought. Then, with a rumbling sigh, he turned away. The mountain groaned as the worm coiled deeper into the shadows, his tail dragging like a ship's anchor across stone. The old man's shoulders eased. "He spares you," he said softly. "For now." Lionel staggered back, gasping, sweat pouring from his brow. "Why? Why not kill me?" "Cannibal eats only when hungry," said the old man. "And some say he can smell fate upon a man. Perhaps he smelled yours and found it bitter." He turned, his lantern's green flame casting ghostly light on the walls. "Come, there is more to show you, if you've not yet lost your courage." They followed a narrow passage that twisted through the rock like a serpent's burrow. Steam hissed from vents, and droplets of boiling water fell from the ceiling like rain. Lionel's mind raced. He had seen the dragon, the devourer of dragons, and yet lived. The thought filled him with awe, and something darker still. Hunger. "Who are you?" Lionel asked. "Why do you dwell here among the beasts?" The old man's voice echoed against the stone. "Once, I was a dragon keeper. Long before the dance began, I tended the eggs of Syrax and Dreamfire, and brushed the scales of Caraxes himself. But when Cannibal grew too bold and feasted upon a clutch of hatchlings, the lords feared him. They forbade his name to be spoken, forbade his lair to be sought. Yet I remained, for someone must guard the bones of the dead." "Guard them? From what?" The man's gaze flickered toward the dark. "From him. Cannibal devours not only flesh but fire. Even dead dragons hold heat in their bones. He feeds on it, hungers for it, and there is no flame in this world fierce enough to sate him." They came at last into a smaller cavern, where the air cooled and shimmered like glass. At its center lay a stone basin, carved in the likeness of wings, filled with shimmering dust. Among the ash rested something small and pale, an egg no larger than a man's head, yet pulsing faintly with red light. Lionel's breath caught. "A dragon's egg." The old man nodded. "Aye, one that should not exist. This egg was laid by Cannibal's last mate, slain by his own jaws. I found it hidden in the ash, buried where he could not smell it. For years I've kept it secret. If the blacks or greens learn of it, they'll fight to claim it. But if Cannibal learns of it, he'll destroy it." Lionel finished. The man's eyes glimmered. "You understand now. The dance of the dragons tears the world above apart. But here, beneath the mountain, another war brews. A war between fire and its own shadow." Lionel stepped closer, the egg's faint warmth drawing him in. "It lives," he whispered. "I can feel it." "Aye," said the man, "and perhaps it feels you. Tell me, boy, do you still dream of flying?" Lionel hesitated. "Every night." "Then perhaps the gods brought you here for a purpose. Cannibal will not be tamed, but his blood runs in this egg. A hatchling born of him may be ridden, if one dares." The thought sent shivers through Lionel. To hatch a dragon, Cannibal's own blood, would make him greater than any knight or lord. But the risk? "If Cannibal learns what we do," said Lionel, "he'll kill us both." The old man smiled, thin and weary. "He will, if he lives to see it." That night, Lionel could not sleep. He returned to the stables, but the roar of the mountain echoed in his skull. Visions of green fire and black wings haunted him. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw Cannibal's teeth, gleaming like swords. Yet beneath the fear burned a fierce resolve. The next day, Lionel returned to the caverns, bringing with him tools and a sack of straw soaked in oil. The old man, who now told him his name was Maelor, was waiting. Together they began to carve out a small chamber beside the basin, feeding the vents with coal and oil to keep the egg warm. Weeks passed. The war above grew bloodier. Word reached Dragonstone that dragons had been slain on both sides. Sunfire crippled, Meleys dead at Rook's Rest, Vermithor rising again in the Vale. The air itself seemed heavier with loss. But beneath the mountain, a different kind of life was stirring. The egg pulsed more brightly each day. When Lionel placed his hand upon it, he could feel the beat of a tiny heart within. One evening, as they tended the fires, Maelor spoke quietly. "When this hatchling comes forth, you must flee Dragonstone. Rhaenyra's men would take it for their war. A dragon unclaimed is a prize no faction would ignore. You must hide it, raise it where no lord's banner flies." Lionel frowned. "And what of you?" "I am too old to flee. My fate lies here, with the mountain." A deep rumble rolled through the rock then, shaking the cavern walls. Dust fell from above. Lionel froze. "He's awake." Cannibal's roar followed, a sound so vast it seemed the world itself screamed. Flames burst from the cracks in the walls, and the air turned red with heat. Mailer seized Lionel's arm. "He knows," the old man hissed. "He knows." From the depths of the tunnel came the sound of claws scraping stone. Lionel glimpsed the glow of green fire moving closer. The mountain trembled beneath the beast's wrath. Mailer thrust a dagger into Lionel's hands, its hilt carved from dragon bone. "Go! Take the egg! Save it! The Devourer must not find it!" "But you... Go!" Lionel snatched the egg from the basin, its shell scorching his palms. He turned and ran, the roar of the cannibal shaking the air behind him. Flames chased him through the tunnels, licking at the walls, boiling the very air. He reached the outer passage just as the mountains split with fire. The world turned white. The last thing he saw before the light swallowed him was Maelor standing firm, lantern raised as Cannibal's shadow fell upon him like a storm of night. Then came silence, and the sea's wind once more. Lionel lay upon the ash-strewn beach, the egg clutched against his chest. The sky above burned red. The volcano's heart thundered behind him, and somewhere in its depths, the Devourer roared his fury to the heavens. The boy had escaped, but the dragon had not forgotten, and Lionel Velaryon knew that from this night forth, his fate was bound not to the lords of war, but to the black heart of the mountain itself. The sea mist hung thick around Dragonstone's shores, turning the jagged rocks into gray ghosts that shifted and vanished with each breath of wind. Lionel Velaryon lay where the tide had left him, his body battered, his clothes burned and torn, but the dragon's egg was still clutched against his chest. It throbbed with heat, faint but steady, like the heartbeat of some buried god. He rose unsteadily to his feet, his skin streaked with ash. Behind him, Dragonmont belched flame into the clouds, painting the night with red fire. The mountain's roar had not ceased since the moment he fled. Cannibal's fury shook the island. Lionel knew that if he lingered, he would be found, by the dragon or by the Queen's men. Either would mean death. He staggered along the coast until dawn began to pale the eastern sky. His legs carried him more from instinct than strength, his mind filled only with the thought of keeping the egg safe. At last, he reached the old fisher's wharf at Driftmark's edge, where half-rotted boats waited like forgotten bones. He chose the sturdiest one, pushed it into the surf, and rode into the fog without looking back. Behind him, Dragonstone bled smoke into the sky. Ahead, the sea whispered secrets. For 3 days he drifted. The storm winds tore at him, the salt bit his lips, and hunger gnawed at his belly. But the egg kept him warm. Its glow was faint, visible only at night beneath the folds of his cloak, but it comforted him, as though the tiny life within understood his suffering. On the morning of the 4th day, land appeared, a stretch of cliffs crowned with dark pine. He did not know the place, only that it was far from Dragonstone, and that was enough. He beached the boat, dragging it into a small cove where no smoke rose from chimneys and no footsteps marked the sand. There, he built a shelter from driftwood and stone, and for the first time in his life, Lionel lived alone. Days became weeks. He hunted seabirds with a sharpened stick, gathered mussels from the tide pools, and spoke aloud to the egg as if it were a child. He told it of the sea, of the storms, of the dragons that ruled men's hearts and burned their castles to ash. Sometimes, when the fire burned low, and the night wind hissed through the pines, he thought he heard something answer, a soft, rhythmic pulse from within the shell, like the echo of wings. But peace, as ever, was a fleeting thing. One evening, as Lionel returned from the cliffs with his small catch of fish, he saw smoke rising from the trees above his cove, not from his own fire, but another's. He dropped the fish and ran. By the time he reached his shelter, 3 men stood waiting. They were rough-looking, sailors, perhaps deserters, their clothes marked by salt and blood. One of them held Lionel's cloak. Another was crouched near the egg, poking at it with a dagger. "Look here, brothers," the tallest said, grinning. "A silver-haired whelp hoarding a pretty stone. Thought you could keep it from us?" Lionel's heart pounded. "Step away from it." The men laughed. "And if we don't?" Without thinking, Lionel snatched a burning branch from his hearth and swung it wide. The tallest dodged, cursing, but the heat made the others stumble back. The dagger clattered to the sand. Then, from the egg, came a sound. A sharp crack like thunder in miniature. All 4 men froze. Another crack followed, and a hairline fracture glowed red across the shell's surface. "What in the 7 hells?" one of the men began, but his words were drowned by a shriek so piercing it seemed to split the sky. The egg burst open in a flare of fire and smoke. Lionel shielded his eyes, but through the blaze he saw movement, wings, wet and black, unfolding like a shadow given life. The hatchling rose from the ruins of its shell, tiny yet terrible, its scales glistening like oil, its eyes bright green as its sire's. The men screamed. One turned to flee, but the hatchling spat a jet of flame that caught his back alight. Another fell to his knees, clawing at the sand, while the third stumbled into the surf, howling. The air reeked of burning flesh. When it was done, only Lionel remained standing. The little dragon crouched before him, smoke curling from its nostrils, its gaze fixed upon him with an intelligence that chilled and thrilled his soul. "Easy," he whispered. "Easy now." It hissed, but did not strike. Slowly, Lionel lowered himself to one knee, hand outstretched. The hatchling sniffed at his fingers, then, to his astonishment, pressed its head into his palm. The heat of it seared his skin, but he did not pull away. "You're mine," he said softly, "and I am yours." He named the creature Shadow Flame. From that night on, boy and dragon were inseparable. Shadow Flame grew swiftly, feeding on fish and what game Lionel could snare, his wings growing stronger with each sunrise. When he slept, Lionel slept beside him, the dragon's warmth warding off the chill of the sea wind. When he dreamed of flying, of clouds and fire and vengeance. Yet Lionel knew they could not hide forever. Word of dragons spread like wildfire across the realm, and whispers of a strange boy with a black hatchling reached the wrong ears. One gray morning, ships appeared on the horizon, black sails marked with a silver seahorse. Valerian ships, his father's kin, or so they would claim, though they had never known him as more than a stain on their name. Panic struck him. He tried to lead Shadow Flame into the trees, but the dragon, now the size of a warhound, snarled and resisted. The sound carried far. The first of the soldiers came ashore before dusk. Lionel counted 6 of them, armed and wary. Their captain, a tall man with a coral clasp upon his cloak, called out, "By order of Queen Rhaenyra, all dragons and their riders belong to the Black Council. Step forward, lad. The queen will reward you well for your service." "I serve no queen," Lionel said, stepping from the shadows, soot still upon his face. "And this dragon belongs to no one." The captain smiled thinly. then you are a fool." At his signal, 2 men advanced. Shadowflame hissed, wings spreading, eyes bright with green fire. "Hold," the captain barked, but too late. The hatchling unleashed a burst of flame that turned the sand to glass. The men screamed and fell. The others drew their blades, but none dared approach. "Run!" Lionel shouted. Shadowflame leapt, wings beating furiously. Together they fled into the forest, fire flashing through the pines behind them. When night fell, Lionel looked back from the cliffs. The Valyrian ship burned where it lay anchored, its sails aflame, its crew scattering into the waves. The boy's heart pounded with both terror and wonder. He had killed men, noble men, and the realm would not forgive him for it. Shadowflame circled above, crying into the storm. Lionel lifted his hand toward him, feeling the first drops of rain upon his face. In the distance, beyond the sea's horizon, Dragonstone's volcano still burned. Somewhere within its heart, the cannibal stirred and turned his gaze toward the smoke rising far to the west. The devourer of dragons had scented his blood again. The wind rose fierce and wild along the cliffs of Crackclaw Point, where the forests met the sea, and the waves broke like thunder against the rocks. It was there that Lionel Velaryon made his refuge, a hollow hidden behind a waterfall, deep enough to conceal both man and dragon. The spray kept the air cool, masking the scent of smoke and salt, and the endless roar of the water drowned every whisper but one, the slow, steady breathing of Shadowflame as he slept. A year had passed since that night on the beach when the egg split open. The hatchling was no longer small. His wings now spanned the width of a fishing boat. His claws could tear through oak, and his fire burned hotter than any forge. His scales had darkened to deep obsidian, their edges faintly green in the light. The boy who had found him was no longer a boy. Lionel's hair, once pale as silver, was matted and long, streaked with soot. His eyes gleamed with the sharpness of one who had lived too long on the edge of danger. He had grown into a creature of the wilds, half-starved, half-mad, but strong. And in the lonely hours before dawn, when the mist hung heavy and the forest slept, he trained. He climbed upon Shadowflame's back, pressing his knees against the dragon's ribs, whispering the words Maelor had once taught him, words half Valyrian, half prayer. Sovez, Nuhis Zaldriz's, "Rise, my dragon." At first, Shadowflame only shifted, restless and uncertain. But as days turned into weeks, the dragon began to understand. His wings beat the air in slow, steady strokes, sending spray from the waterfall flying like silver rain. They did not yet take to the skies, but each attempt carried them a little higher, a little farther from the ground. Lionel learned the rhythm of the beast, how his heart quickened before the leap, how his muscles coiled beneath the scales like ropes of iron. He learned the sound of the wind through the wings, the way it changed when the air caught true. Every bruise, every fall taught him more. Yet even as the bond between them deepened, danger crept closer. Travelers spoke of war spreading across the realm, of dragonfire at Harrenhal, of corpses littering the Blackwater. Queen Rhaenyra's strength was failing. Her sons were dead or scattered. The usurper's banners flew high over King's Landing, and though Lionel had no allegiance, the blood in his veins tied him to their fate. One morning, as he gathered driftwood along the shore, he found a corpse washed upon the rocks. A sailor, his armor marked with the three-headed dragon of Targaryen. A parchment was clutched in his dead hand, sealed with black wax. Lionel pried it open. It was a call to arms. By decree of Queen Rhaenyra, all dragon riders loyal to the Blacks are to rally at Dragonstone. The Devourer of dragons has awakened. The mountain burns. The queen commands that the beast be slain, for it threatens all who bear the blood of fire. Lionel's breath caught. Cannibal, alive, enraged, and hunted. He looked toward the eastern horizon, where faint smoke still rose beyond the sea. For the first time in months, he thought of Maelor, of the old man's green lantern, of the words whispered in the dark. He feeds on fire. If Rhaenyra sought to kill Cannibal, she would send her riders. Vermithor's heirs, Silverwing's kin, all the great dragons of her side, but none of them knew the truth of the mountain as he did. None had seen what he had seen. And somewhere deep within him, a terrible thought took root. Cannibal had murdered his mate and nearly destroyed Lionel's only chance of life. But Cannibal's blood now lived within Shadowflame. To slay the Devourer would be to prove himself, not just a bastard, not just a thief, but a dragon lord born of fire. That night, as lightning danced across the waves, Lionel stood before his dragon. "We're going back," he said softly, "back to Dragonstone." Shadowflame's great head lifted, nostrils flaring, eyes glinting with reflected flame. The dragon let out a low, questioning growl. "I know," Lionel murmured. "It's death we fly toward, but death rides the same wind as glory." The storm broke at dawn. They rose from the cliffs in a rush of thunder and wind, Shadowflame's wings carving the sky. The world blurred beneath them, forest, sea, and stone melting into streaks of gray. Lionel clung to the dragon's neck, his heart hammering with fear and exultation. The roar of the wind drowned all thought. For the first time, they truly flew. It was not graceful. The dragon's wings wobbled in the gale, and Lionel's vision swam as they climbed higher. But when they broke through the clouds, the sun struck them full, and the world fell away. The sea stretched endless beneath, and the sky above burned gold. He laughed aloud, wild and free. "Faster, my Shadowflame. Show me the sky that even kings have never seen." They soared for hours, chasing the edge of the storm. By midday, Dragonstone appeared, a black shape rising from the sea, wreathed in smoke. The mountain glowed red, and the air above it shimmered with heat. From afar, Lionel saw other dragons circling the peaks, Sunfire's gold, Tyrax's green, and a massive bronze that could only be Vermithor. Their riders were dots against the fire, glinting like insects in the blaze. The queen's command was clear. The devourer of dragons was to die. But as Lionel drew nearer, he saw movement in the smoke. Vast wings, jagged and dark as the void. Cannibal burst from the volcano's mouth, roaring his fury to the heavens. He dwarfed the others, his scales cracked with fire, his eyes burning bright as the sun. The riders wheeled their mounts to meet him. Fire met fire. The sky became a storm of flame. Vermithor's breath seared the clouds, while Cannibal tore through the air like a living shadow. One dragon fell screaming into the sea, its rider lost. Another vanished in the smoke, its wings ablaze. Lionel felt Shadowflame tense beneath him, the young dragon's blood singing at the scent of kin. "Not yet," Lionel hissed, gripping the reins. "Wait." Below, the battle raged. Cannibal struck Vermithor's neck with a sound like stone breaking. The bronze dragon shrieked, fire bursting from the wound, and crashed into the cliffs below. Cannibal turned, devouring the flames that spilled from his foe, as though drinking the dragon's very soul. "Fire feeds fire," Lionel whispered. Maelor's words echoed in his mind. If Cannibal grew stronger by consuming the life of others, then only his own blood could end him. He leaned close to Shadowflame's ear. "Now, for all that he took from us, for the Old Keeper, for the fire he stole." Shadowflame roared. The air split as they dove through the smoke, wings folded tight. Cannibal looked up, sensing the challenge. The old worm's gaze met his, and for a heartbeat, Lionel saw something like recognition. Then they collided. The sky erupted with flame and fury. Black wings tangled with black, green fire against red, and the mountain shook with their struggle. Lionel clung to his saddle, shouting words lost in the wind, as shadow flames sank his teeth into Cannibal's neck. The older dragon bellowed and struck back, claws raking across Shadow Flame's flank. Blood, molten, glowing, splattered the clouds. The air burned, the world blurred into fire and smoke. Lionel's vision darkened as they plummeted toward the mountain's heart, locked together, father and son, flame and shadow. The sea rose to meet them, hissing. When the fire cleared, only smoke remained. From the cliffs, the surviving riders saw a single streak of black descend into the mist and vanish. Cannibal's roar echoed once more, faint, fading, then gone. They said later that the Devourer of dragons was slain that day. But in the weeks that followed, shepherds along the narrow sea swore they saw a dark shape gliding low over the waves, smaller than Cannibal, yet with the same green fire in its eyes. A boy's voice sometimes carried on the wind, calling a name the sea soon swallowed. And far beneath Dragonstone, in a cave untouched by man, two sets of bones lay entwined, one vast and ancient, the other small and sharp as new-forged steel. The sea winds were colder now, heavy with salt and sorrow. The storms that once cloaked the shores of Dragonstone had quieted, but the island itself seemed to sleep uneasily. Smoke no longer rose from Dragonmont's heart, and though the fires within still glowed faintly red, they burned with the sluggish pulse of dying embers. The dance of the dragons had nearly ended. The sky, once filled with flame and shadow, was empty save for the gulls. Men said that the age of dragons was finished, that their bones would fade into the mountain and their songs into the wind. But in the quiet villages along the narrow sea, strange tales still passed from mouth to ear. Fishermen spoke of a shadow gliding beneath the waves on moonless nights, vast and black, whose wake boiled like the breath of a sleeping giant. In Driftmark's harbors, sailors told of green fire flickering far offshore, where no lantern burned. None dared to seek its source, yet one man did. Sir Adam of Hull, once named Valerian, rode his dragon Sea Smoke across the misty waters one dawn. Following the whispers, his heart was restless. Too many dragons had died in the war, and the loss weighed upon him like chainmail. He wished to find proof, any proof, that not all had been devoured by the dance. The wind carried the scent of salt and something older, something like burned stone. The waves below were dark, the sea strangely warm. Then he saw it. A ridge of black scales broke the surface, vast, glistening, gliding just beneath the waves. It was not as large as Cannibal had been, but it moved with the same terrible grace. For a moment, the creature turned its head, and Adam glimpsed eyes that gleamed green as wildfire. "By the gods," he whispered, "it cannot be." The black shape vanished beneath the waves. Sea Smoke gave a shrill cry and wheeled back toward the shore, refusing to follow. Adam did not press him. He knew that scent. It was the scent of another dragon's dominion. He returned to Dragonstone with his heart hammering. When he told the Queen's men what he had seen, they laughed. "Another ghost story," said Sir Garmund the Castellan. "All that remains of Cannibal are bones and ash. The mountain keeps them still." But Adam was not so easily swayed. He had seen the fire with his own eyes, green as the deep heart of emerald stone. That night, he could not sleep. He walked the halls of the fortress, where dragon skulls lined the walls like grim sentinels. His steps carried him to the old keeper's tunnels, passages long sealed since Maelor's time, leading deep into the mountain. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of sulfur. He took a torch and descended. The deeper he went, the hotter it grew, until his breath came short and sweat slicked his brow. The walls pulsed faintly with heat, and somewhere far below, a slow, rhythmic thrum echoed, like the beating of a giant's heart. At last, the tunnel opened into a cavern half lit by fire that seeped from cracks in the stone. Bones lay scattered across the floor, vast, curved, and blackened. Adam's torchlight danced over them. Skulls shattered, ribs warped by heat. The air reeked of old death and salt. He recognized the largest among them, Cannibals. Its empty socket stared into the dark as if still hunting. But beside it lay another smaller skull, not yet worn by time. The bones were sleek, newer, their edges sharp. Between the two sets of remains lay something stranger still, a nest of melted stone, its center hollow, as though something had burst free. Adam's hand trembled as he lowered the torch. By all the gods of old Valyria! The air shifted. From the far shadows came the sound of stone scraping against stone. Then, a hiss, deep and resonant, that froze his blood. He turned slowly. Two green eyes gleamed from the darkness, vast and unblinking. The light of his torch caught upon scales black as night and a ridge of sharp spines running down a long neck. The creature stepped forward, and the cavern filled with heat. Its wings brushed the walls, scattering ash. The dragon was smaller than Cannibal, yet full-grown, lean, fierce, and terrible. Fire glimmered between its teeth, green and red mingled. Adam's knees nearly gave way. He knew the stories, whispered by the few who remembered. The bastard boy who had fled Dragonstone with a forbidden egg, the one who vanished when the mountain burned. Shadowflame, he breathed. The dragon's head tilted. At the sound of its name, a low growl rolled through its chest. Adam took a step back. You live? The son of the Devourer himself. The dragon's gaze fixed on him, ancient and unknowable. Then came another sound, softer, human. A figure stepped from behind the beast's wing, cloaked in shadow, his hair long and pale as ash. His face was thin, his eyes bright with firelight. Who speaks that name? He asked, his voice echoing like wind through hollow stone. Adam's torch shook in his hand. I am Adam Valerion. I come from the Queen's court, seeking what remains of the dragons. And you? The pale man stepped closer, the firelight revealing scars across his arms and neck, old burns turned silver. I am no lord's servant. I am the mountain's son. Lionel, Adam breathed. Lionel Valerian. They said you were dead. Many things die, Lionel said softly, but not all remain so. Shadowflame loomed behind him, its breath hot enough to make the torch gutter. Adam raised a trembling hand. The Queen would have you return. She needs riders. The world needs dragons once more. Lionel's eyes flickered toward the cavern ceiling. The world has had its fill of dragons. Fire has devoured fire, and men have learned nothing from the ashes. Then why remain here? Lionel turned to look upon the bones beside him, the great skull of Cannibal, the ancient ribs that arched like blackened cathedrals. Because he waits, he said. Even in death, the Devourer feeds. His fire lingers beneath the rock, whispering, "You cannot kill what was born of hunger." As if to prove him right, the ground shuddered. A faint rumble echoed through the cavern, distant, but rising. The walls glowed faintly red, veins of molten stone pulsing to life. Adam stumbled back. The mountain awakens, Lionel said. His gaze turned hard. Leave now, Knight of Hull. Tell no one what you have seen. Dragonstone is not yet done with fire. Adam hesitated. And you? Lionel looked toward the sleeping bones. I was born of its flame. I will end with it. The tremors grew stronger. Pebbles fell from the ceiling, and Shadow Flame gave a roar that shook the stone. Lionel lifted his hand, pressing it to the dragon's flank. Go, he commanded. Tell your queen that the Devourer still watches, and that the age of dragons dies not by war, but by the weight of their own hunger. Adam fled. The tunnels behind him shook as he climbed, the roar of Shadow Flame echoing like thunder. When he reached the surface, the air was thick with ash once more, the sea wild and red beneath the dawn, and far below, in the mountain's heart, fire bloomed again. Those who dwelt on Dragonstone later spoke of seeing green flame rise from the volcano that night, brighter than any since the war. Some swore they heard wings in the clouds, though no shape could be seen. By morning, the fire was gone. The mountain slept once more. But in the deepest chambers of the fortress, the air remained warm, as though something unseen still breathed beneath the stone, a sleeping flame, biding its time, waiting for the world above to forget. And when the night winds swept over the cliffs, the waves sometimes hissed as though something vast moved beneath them, leaving only a trail of emerald light upon the darkened sea. The years that followed were quiet on Dragonstone, or so it seemed to those who dwelt in its halls. The queen was dead, the war ended, and the Iron Throne now passed from hand to hand like a cursed relic. Lords plotted, maesters chronicled, and small folk prayed, yet the mountain remained as it ever was, brooding, black, and breathing faintly with unseen fire. But the quiet was a false thing. Beneath the stone and ash, something still stirred. The fisherfolk of Driftmark whispered of strange lights dancing upon the sea, flashes of green that gleamed in the mist before vanishing as though swallowed by the deep. In the woods of Crack-Claw Point, shepherds claimed their flocks were found burned to bone without smoke or spark to mark the cause. And once, on a night of no moon, a trading galley vanished within sight of Dragonstone's cliffs, leaving behind only charred timbers that floated like ribs upon the tide. The Meisters said it was madness and fear. The islanders said it was the mountain's hunger returning. And far below, in a cavern where no man had walked in years, the bones of Cannibal shifted. They had blackened fully now, turned as hard as obsidian. The stone around them had melted and cooled 100 times over, sealing them in a tomb of fire. But from within that tomb came a pulse, faint, slow, like the echo of a buried heart. Lionel Valerian stood before the bones, as he had every day since Adam of Hull's visit. His hair was streaked with gray, his face drawn and hollow, his eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. He had not left the mountain in many moons. The air here was poison to men, yet he breathed it as if it were life itself. Beside him lay Shadow Flame, stretched upon the stone like a black tide. The dragon was grown vast now, his wings brushing the cavern walls, his scales dulled by soot. His fire burned deep within, green at the core, pulsing in time with the light beneath the bones of the Devourer. Lionel laid his palm against the stone. "You still feed, old one," he murmured. "Even death cannot still your fire." The ground trembled in answer, faint but sure. He turned to Shadow Flame, stroking the beast's snout with a hand scarred by years of heat. "Do you feel it? The call of your blood? He would rise again if the mountain willed it, and if he does, the world will burn anew." The dragon's eyes gleamed, unblinking. A low growl rumbled from deep in its chest. Lionel smiled bitterly. "Aye, you fear him as all do. But perhaps it is not fear that binds you, my friend. Perhaps it is kinship. The fire that lives in him lives in you, and in me." He turned his gaze upward, toward the cracks that glowed faintly with the breath of the volcano. Men think the age of dragons is ended. They celebrate their peace and forget the cost of it. But fire never dies. It only sleeps. That night, he dreamed. He stood upon the cliffs of old Valyria, where towers of glass and stone rose from rivers of flame. The sky burned red, and the air was full of the sound of wings. In the distance, a mountain split apart, and from its heart rose a shape so vast it blotted out the sun. A dragon of black fire, his scales bleeding smoke. "Cannibal," Lionel whispered in his dream. The beast turned its head, and its eyes, green and endless, fixed upon him. But when it spoke, it was not with the voice of a beast. "You are my son," it said. "Through blood and flame, I endure in you." Lionel fell to his knees. "I am no god's child," he said. "Only a man who stole life from your hunger." The dragon's wings unfurled, darkening the heavens. Man and dragon are one flame. You think yourself a thief, yet you were forged by fire. All that burns belongs to me. The world split open beneath him. He fell into darkness, surrounded by green light. The voice followed him down. "When the world forgets the flame, I will return. You will call me, and I will answer." He woke screaming, his body drenched in sweat. The mountain's heart thundered above him, louder than before. Shadowflame crouched beside him, growling, the membranes of his wings trembling as if with fear. The heat had grown unbearable. Streams of molten rock began to run along the cavern floor, and from the fissures came a sound like whispering voices. Lionel pressed his hands to his ears, but the whispers seeped through his skin. "Fire remembers. Fire remembers." He stumbled to the pool where Mailer's lantern had once burned, but the green flame there was gone, replaced by a pit of glowing embers. His reflection shimmered upon the molten surface, and for an instant, the face that looked back at him was not his own. The mountain shook. Outside, fishermen fled as Dragonmont erupted anew. Smoke blotted out the stars, and the sea turned red beneath the rain of ash. From the summit came a roar so vast that it was heard even in King's Landing, and men fell to their knees, weeping, for they knew the sound. Cannibal had returned. Lionel staggered through the collapsing caverns, calling to Shadowflame. The dragon came, wings half spread, his cry echoing through the molten air. Together they climbed toward the surface, through tunnels that glowed like the heart of a forge. When they burst into the open air, the night sky was a storm of fire. From the mountain's crown, the great shadow rose, immense, impossible, its wings spanning the heavens. Cannibal's scales gleamed wet with flame, his eyes twin suns of green light. The world seemed to shrink beneath him. Shadowflame roared a challenge, but the sound was swallowed by the wind. Lionel mounted, gripping the saddle, his hair whipped by heat. "We end this now," he shouted, though his voice was lost to the storm. Once and for all. The dragons met in midair. Their clash split the clouds. Fire met fire. Shadow met shadow. The sea boiled beneath their fury. Lionel's vision swam with light and pain. He could feel the mountain's pulse through his dragon's heart and through his own. Cannibal's jaws closed around Shadowflame's neck. Lionel screamed, driving his spear into the beast's eye. Green fire poured forth, searing his flesh. "Burn me then," he cried, "but you will not take the world again." With the last of his strength, He wrenched free the dagger Maelor had given him long ago, the one carved from dragon bone. He plunged it deep into the wound where fire and blood met. A sound like 1,000 thunders filled the sky. The light consumed them both. When dawn came, the mountain was quiet once more. The smoke had cleared, and the sea lay still, black as glass. Fishermen who dared approach said they found no bones, no wreckage, only a faint shimmer upon the water, green and gold, fading with the morning sun. And on the cliffs above Driftmark, a single feather of black scale lay half buried in the ash, still warm to the touch. The maesters would later write that the last dragons died in those years, their fires spent. But the small folk of the narrow sea know otherwise. On nights when the wind is right, they say, a dark shape passes before the moon, not large but fierce, wings glinting green in the light. It never lands, nor answers any call. It only circles once, then vanishes into the mists above the waves. Some say it is Shadowflame, carrying his master's spirit across the sea. Others whisper that Cannibal lives yet, searching for fire to devour. But the oldest of them all, the ones who still remember the dance, say that man and dragon became one that night, bound forever in the mountain's heart. And when the world forgets the taste of fire, Dragonstone will remember. Long years passed. The realm mended as best it could, though the scars of the dance still marked it like burned flesh. The dragons were gone, or so all men said. Their skulls still hung in the halls of the Red Keep, black trophies of a vanished age. The maesters called it a mercy. The small folk called it justice. The singers, though, called it tragedy, and sang of fire lost and forgotten. But the sea does not forget, and neither does the stone. In the black cliffs of Dragonstone, where storms never ceased and the wind screamed like a wounded thing, the mountain still whispered. The fires beneath it no longer flared, but glowed faintly, deep within the rock, a pulse, slow and patient. On nights when the moon rose red over the sea, that faint glow spread through the veins of the island like blood. The waves steamed where they touched the shore. Gulls fled inland, and sometimes, in the lull before dawn, a sound came from the mountain. Not thunder, not the rumble of shifting stone, but something alive. The old fishers of Driftmark called it the mountain's breath. In truth, it was the echo of what had once been. Far beneath the fortress, in a cavern sealed by time and fire, the air still shimmered with heat. The bones of Cannibal were gone, turned to ash by the storm of flame that had ended the Devourer and his kin. Yet in that same chamber lay a single shape that had not burned. A stone figure, half man and half dragon, fused within a shell of cooled magma. Wings unfurled, head bowed, beneath the crust of stone, faint green light flickered in its chest, beating like a heart. Lionel Valerian, or what was left of him. The maesters would have said it was illusion, the play of heat and shadow. But there are things the Citadel never dared write, and Dragonstone's keepers, those who tended the dead dragon's bones, whispered of it in fear. They called him the Firebound, and swore that the spirit of the mountain clung to his body still. Generations passed. The Iron Throne changed hands many times. The blood of dragons thinned, their tongues forgotten, their fire turned to myth. The world grew colder, smaller, safer, until the storms returned. The first signs were small, tremors in the ground, a taste of ash upon the wind. Then came the birds, whole flocks of seabirds falling dead from the sky, their feathers singed as if by unseen flame. One night, the sky over Dragonstone turned green. By dawn, the The mountain was smoking again. The lord of the island sent riders to investigate, but only one returned. A boy of 15, pale as milk, his eyes wild with terror. He claimed he had heard voices within the tunnels, whispering in a tongue older than men. Valerio udra celitas. Fire remembers itself. At first, no one believed him. But then came the light. From the cracks of the mountain poured a radiance, not red, but green, cold and ghostly, as if the very heart of the volcano burned with wildfire. It bathed the sea and the fortress walls in emerald glow. The people fled. Even the ravens refused to fly near. And on the third night, it spoke. The sound rolled across the island like the breath of a giant, a voice deep and distant, neither wholly human nor beast. It echoed from the cliffs to the clouds, shaking the stones of Dragonstone's keep. Exio hen, Nuha hen Zaldrazes, a king of mine and of dragons. The lord of the castle locked himself in the great hall, trembling. The maester sent word to King's Landing, begging for help, but the message never arrived. The ship was found later, burned to the waterline, its crew missing. Only the blackened hull remained, and upon it, carved into the wood by some immense claw, was a single word in Valyrian: remember. Weeks passed. The mountain burned brighter. Then, one night, a band of smugglers seeking shelter from the storm claimed to have seen a figure walking along the shore. He was tall and cloaked, his hair pale as silver. With him walked a shadow shaped like wings. They followed him at a distance until he turned, and they saw his eyes glowing green like wildfire. By morning, the men were gone. Only their ship was found, drifting empty near the cliffs. Stories spread like ash on the wind. Some said the firebound had risen, Lionel Valerian reborn by the mountain's flame. Others whispered that the Devourer's soul had found new flesh. None could say which was true. In the months that followed, the sea around Dragonstone boiled. Fish died in the nets, and the sky above the island glowed faintly, even at noon. The citadel sent a scholar, Maester Alaric, to record the phenomena. His last entry, found years later in a ruined tower, read, "The air grows heavy with sulfur and song. I have seen a shadow upon the mountain, vast and winged, though no creature could cast it. The voice calls to me now, in the old tongue. It speaks the word, Sovs, rise. I think the mountain remembers." After that, his writings end. The island was abandoned. For many years, no ships approached its shores. The memory of dragons faded further still, swallowed by the march of time. But the mountain waited. A century passed, then another, and on the 200th year after the dance, a comet blazed across the sky. Not red, as in the tales of old, but green, streaking over the narrow sea like a wound reopened. It passed over Dragonstone and vanished into the heart of the volcano. The next morning, the sea boiled once more. Fishermen along Driftmark swore they saw a column of smoke rising higher than the clouds, and from it, wings, vast, black and shimmering green at the edges. The sound that followed split the heavens. It was not Cannibal's roar, nor was it any dragon that men had known. It was something new. When the light faded, only the sea remained calm again. Yet on still nights, those who dared sail near the island swore they heard a single voice, deep and distant, carried upon the wind. Fire remembers. And sometimes, if the clouds broke and the moon shone upon the water, they saw a faint shape far below the surface, black and green, coiled like a serpent, its wings folded close. It would rise, they said, only when the world forgot what fire could do, and when it did, the Devourer's heir, the shadow of both man and dragon, would soar once more above the narrow sea to remind men that flame cannot die, nor hunger ever sleep. So ends the tale of Cannibal, the devourer of dragons, and of Lionel Velaryon, the firebound. But in the deep places of the earth, where no Meister dares to go, the fire still stirs, and Dragonstone, as ever, dreams of wings. 100 years after the green comet's fall, the world had changed once more. The last of the Targaryens sat a weak king upon the Iron Throne, his line thinned and fearful, his courtiers whispering of ancient glories lost. The songs of dragons had turned to lullabies. Even the Meisters dared to speak of Valyria as only myth. Yet on stormy nights, when the wind screamed and the rain lashed the Blackwater, sailors would raise their cups and whisper of Dragonstone. They said no man who set foot upon that isle returned whole. They said the cliffs bled fire, and the caves sang in tongues not meant for mortal ears. And always, there was talk of the shadow in the sea. One such sailor, a youth named Corin Pike, grew up on those tales. He was no lordling nor knight, merely the son of a fisherman from Driftmark, but his heart burned with curiosity, sharper than fear. Each night, as his father spoke of ships lost near Dragonstone, Corin listened with wide eyes, dreaming not of gold or glory, but of truth. When his father died in a squall, Corin took his small boat and sailed alone toward the Forbidden Isle. The sea was calm that morning, gray and heavy beneath the mist. He saw Dragonstone long before he reached it, the black fortress carved like a dragon's skull, its towers spearing the clouds. As he drew closer, the air grew hot. Steam rose from the water's surface, and a faint green shimmer danced beneath the waves. The island loomed above him, its cliffs jagged, its rocks slick with moss and ash. He found a small cove where the tide had carved an arch into the stone. Dragging his boat ashore, he lit a lantern and stepped into the dark. The tunnels were vast, the air thick with the smell of sulfur. His footsteps echoed against the walls, and from somewhere deep within came a low, steady sound, not quite thunder, not quite the sea. After a time, the passage widened into a great cavern. There, Corin stopped and lifted his lantern. Before him lay a figure, half buried in stone. A man's shape, but not wholly human. Wings fused into his shoulders, claws instead of hands, the faint outline of scales upon his skin. Around him, the rock pulsed faintly with green light, like a dying heart. Corin fell to his knees, awed and afraid. The old tales had spoken of such a thing, the firebound, the one who had slain the Devourer and become one with the flame. But that was legend. This was flesh and stone. He reached out, trembling, and touched the surface. It was warm. No, alive. A crack sounded, then another. The stone began to flake away beneath his fingers. Corin stumbled back, heart hammering. His lantern flickered, the light dimming as the cavern filled with a sound like breathing. The green glow grew brighter, spilling from the cracks in the statue's chest. Then the eyes opened. They burned the color of wildfire. The creature drew its first breath in a century, the sound deep and raw. The stone casing crumbled, falling in sheets that shattered upon the cavern floor. Wings unfurled, great and black, scraping the roof. Corin could not move. The figure turned its gaze upon him, and he felt the heat of it upon his face. "Where am I?" The voice rumbled, low, ancient, more like an echo of the earth than a man's speech. Dragonstone," Corin stammered. You've been sleeping here." The creature's head tilted. "Sleeping?" He looked down at his hands, flexing them, watching the faint glow of fire beneath his skin. "No. Waiting." He rose, the cavern trembling beneath his weight. Ash fell from the ceiling, "Who are you?" Corin whispered. "I was Lionel Valerian once," came the answer, "and yet more. I am the flame that remembers." His gaze swept toward the tunnel that led to the sea. "The world has forgotten us. It is time to remind them." Corin found his voice only long enough to beg, "The dragons are gone. There is nothing left to burn." Lionel smiled, a slow, sorrowful smile. "There is always something left to burn." With that, he turned and strode toward the sea. The air rippled around him with heat, and as he walked, the stone walls glowed. Corin followed at a distance, half in fear, half in awe. When they emerged into the open air, the storm had broken. The sky was black, the sea wild, lightning crackling through the clouds. Lionel lifted his face to the rain. The drops hissed where they touched him, turning to steam. "He is near," he murmured. "Who?" Corin asked. "The one whose shadow never died." A roar answered from across the waves, deep, earth-shaking, filled with hunger. Corin's blood froze. From the sea rose a shape vast and terrible, blacker than the storm clouds above. Wings unfolded, dripping seawater. Green fire burned in its throat. Cannibal. The Devourer of Dragons had returned from the deep, older and mightier than before. His scales were cracked, his flesh scarred by centuries beneath the sea, yet his eyes burned with immortal hatred. Lionel did not flinch. He stepped forward until the surf broke around his knees, raising his arms as if in welcome. "So it was you," he said softly. "You who would not die." Cannibal's roar shook the heavens. Flame burst from his maw, a torrent of green fire that turned the waves to steam. It struck Lionel full, and yet the man did not burn. The fire coursed around him, through him, until the air blazed with light. He raised his own hands, and from his palms poured a fire brighter still, white and gold, born of the mountain's heart. The two flames met, clashing with a sound like thunder breaking the world. Corin threw himself to the ground, shielding his eyes. The sky above became a storm of light, green and gold, twisting together like serpents. The sea boiled, and Dragonstone's cliffs split, sending plumes of smoke into the storm. When at last the roar faded, Corin dared to look up. The sea was calm once more. The sky was pale, the storm spent. Where Lionel had stood, there was only steam rising from the waves. No sign of him remained, no shadow of the dragon either. But high above the clouds, something moved, a faint shape gliding between the dying stars. It was neither wholly man nor beast, its wings vast and luminous, leaving trails of gold and green across the heavens. Corin fell to his knees and wept, for he knew he had witnessed the birth of something new, not dragon, not man, but the last ember of both. In time, the story spread. Some said it was a vision, others that the gods themselves had warred above the narrow sea. But the old sailors of Driftmark, those who still remembered the tales of the Devourer, named it rightly. They said the Firebound had claimed his birthright, that Lionel Valerian and Cannibal had become one flame, reborn in the storm to watch the world from the clouds. And when the tempests raged fiercest over the sea, they said, a golden light would flicker within the heart of the storm, and a voice would echo faint and distant. Fire remembers. So ends the legend of Dragonstone, and the tale of Cannibal the Devourer, who could not die nor forgive. But in every hearth where flame burns bright, in every dream where wings stir the sky, his memory endures. For as long as men draw breath and whisper tales of fire, the dragons are never truly gone. The sea was calm again, but calm seas never last long in the narrow sea. Storms grow there like old grudges, and Dragonstone, brooding, black and eternal, waited always for their return. The fortress loomed over the water like the skull of a forgotten god. For 100 years, men had avoided it, yet still it pulled their eyes when they sailed past, as if the island itself hungered for attention. In those days, the world was quieter. The Targaryen line had broken, their dragons lost to history, their blood scattered among lesser houses. Westeros had turned its gaze northward, to wars of men, to blades of steel instead of flame. But the old ways do not die. They sleep, and that which sleeps can always wake. It began, as such things often do, with a dream. Lady Maris Celtigar of Claw Isle was not one for tales or omens. She was a hard woman, sharp as the sea wind, her heart tempered by storms. But for 7 nights she dreamed of fire. She saw Dragonstone's cliffs burning green, the sea boiling with shadow, and in the heart of the flame, eyes of molten gold staring back at her. Each morning she woke to the same words ringing in her ears, words she did not know yet somehow understood. Dracarys Emagon Issa Doralvi. Fire has remembered its duty. On the 8th day, she could bear it no longer. She summoned her Meister, a timid gray man named Orwyle, and bade him gather a ship. "We sail to Dragonstone," she said, and when he paled, she added, "If the mountain burns again, I would see it with my own eyes before it devours the world." They left before dawn. The sky was low and gray, the sea mirror still. For hours their oars cut through the water, and not a gull cried nor wave broke. Only when the island came into view did the air begin to hum, a deep, faint vibration that set the teeth on edge. Dragonstone was shrouded in mist, but within that mist pulsed a green glow, as though the island's heart beat once more. They made landfall upon the black sands of the western shore. No birds sang there, no crabs scuttled. Even the seaweed seemed dead. Lady Maris led the way, her torch held high, Orwyle stumbling behind her with the satchel of scrolls and charms he'd insisted on bringing. The wind carried heat, not from the sun, but from the mountain above. The path wound steeply upward, through jagged rock and fallen ash, until it ended at a fissure wide enough for a man to crawl through. "This way," she said. The maester hesitated. "My lady, the tales are all we have left of truth," she answered, and entered. Inside, the air was thick, hot, and alive. Green veins of light ran through the stone like molten glass. The deeper they went, the louder the hum grew, until it became a voice. "Fire remembers." Maris froze. The words did not echo from the walls, but from within her mind. She looked to Orwyle, but the maester's lips moved in silent prayer. At last, the tunnel opened into a vast cavern, the same that once had been Lionel Valerian's tomb. The ceiling was lost in darkness, the air trembling with heat, and at the center, half buried in ash, stood the statue of man and dragon fused together. Orwyle gasped, "By all the gods!" It was no longer stone. Cracks ran through its surface, glowing green. The face was that of a man, proud, scarred, but unmistakably alive beneath the rock. His eyes were closed. His hands rested upon a spear of blackened bone. The firebound. Lady Maris stepped closer, her torchlight flickering upon the molten surface. "Is it true, then?" she whispered. "Does fire dream?" The cavern shuddered in answer. From somewhere deep below came a sound like thunder rolling beneath the earth. The green veins of light brightened, running like rivers through the walls. A blast of hot air swept through the chamber, knocking Orwyle from his feet. Then the statue's eyes opened. They burned not green, but gold, bright, terrible, alive. Maris fell to her knees, her torch guttered out. "My lord," she breathed, though she did not know why she spoke the words. The figure's voice filled the air. It was like the crack of mountains splitting, the roar of fire devouring air. "You have called me," it said. "Why?" I dreamed," she stammered. "Of fire, of you." "Then fire still remembers men," he said softly, almost to himself. "That is well." Orwyle, trembling, drew himself upright. "You are Lionel Valerian," he said. "The rider who defied Cannibal, who vanished into the mountain." The golden eyes turned upon him. "Names burn, only flame endures." The maester shrank back. Lionel's gaze lifted toward the cracks above. The world forgets too easily. It buries its sins and calls the ashes peace. He raised a hand, and the air quivered. The age of dragons ended because men grew weak, because they feared the fire that made them strong. They chained it, smothered it, lied to themselves that it was mercy. "What do you seek?" Maris whispered. "Remembrance," he said simply. "The mountain stirs, and with it, what was lost. But flame cannot rise without kindling." Before either could speak, the mountain roared. A tremor split the cavern floor, and molten rock surged upward. The statue cracked open fully, and Lionel stepped free, no longer stone, but flesh wreathed in light. Wings of flame unfurled behind him, vast and shimmering. The heat was unbearable. Orwyle collapsed. Maris shielded her eyes, tears hissing on her cheeks. When the light dimmed, Lionel stood before them as a man, tall, silver-haired, his skin faintly glowing with the pulse of fire beneath. His eyes burned gold still. "Go," he said. "Tell them the firebound walks again. Tell them the age they buried in ash has awoken." Maris staggered backward. "And if they do not believe?" He smiled faintly. "Then they will learn by flame." She fled the mountain, dragging the half-conscious Meister behind her. Behind them, Dragonstone erupted in a column of green fire that pierced the clouds. Ships saw it from Driftmark. The glow could be seen even from King's Landing, where Meisters debated and Septons prayed, but none could agree what it meant. That night, the sea boiled again, and in the morning sky, fishermen swore they saw a shape, a man with wings of flame, rising from the mountain's peak, vanishing into the sun. From that day forth, no one doubted that Dragonstone still lived. Some said the firebound would bring ruin, others that he would herald a new dawn for House Targaryen. But all agreed on one truth: the fire had remembered, and the world, whether it wished to or not, would remember too. The green fire that had torn through Dragonstone faded slowly from the sky, leaving the sea beneath it still and black as ink. For 3 nights, the glow hung over the island, pulsing like the beat of a heart. And for 3 nights the lords of the narrow sea watched in dread. Then, without warning, the light vanished. The mountain went silent. The wind itself seemed to hold its breath. Ships sent to investigate found no trace of life upon the island. The once mighty fortress of House Targaryen stood intact, but empty, its gates unbarred, its halls filled with nothing but dust and the faint scent of smoke. In the throne room, where dragons had once knelt before queens, the air shimmered faintly with heat, though no fire burned. And on the highest tower, carved into the stone, someone had written 3 words in the tongue of Valyria: Ie Dracarys Ivetraean. The fire is awake. After that, few dared speak of Dragonstone at all. Sailors turned their eyes away when they passed its coast. The Meisters called it cursed, though they could not say why. But stories have a way of surviving the silence. Years later, in a small village on the western coast of Crackclaw Point, a child was born beneath a storm. The midwife swore she saw lightning strike the sea at the very moment he drew breath, splitting the waves into green fire. The boy, whom his mother named Aemon, had hair the color of pale ash and eyes that gleamed faintly gold in the dark. He grew quickly and strangely. By the time he could walk, the hearth fires in his home flared when he laughed, and when he cried, the candles wept molten wax. His mother forbade anyone to speak of it, saying he was touched by the gods. But old men whispered the truth, that he was touched by something else. When Aemon turned 10, he began to dream. Always the same dream. A black mountain rising from the sea, its crown wreathed in green flame, and a voice calling his name from within. He told no one. Yet each morning, he awoke with soot upon his hands. By 15, the dreams had grown stronger. He saw a man with silver hair and eyes like molten gold standing amid fire that did not burn him. Behind the man, wings of flame unfurled, and a shadow darker than night moved through the smoke. A dragon vast and silent, its eyes burning green. "You are fire's heir," the man said. "The mountain remembers you." Aemon left home that very night. He took no horse, no gold, only a knife and a cloak of gray wool. The road to Dragonstone was long, but he walked it without rest. When at last he came to the cliffs of the island, the air was warm, though snow fell upon the sea. He crossed the black sands where no birds dared land, and climbed the path to the mountain's gate. The castle loomed above him, silent, its great doors marked with claw scars deep enough to fit a man's arm. He pushed them open. The hinges groaned like distant thunder. Inside, the halls were empty, but not dead. The torches along the walls lit as he passed, one by one, as if greeting him. He followed their light through winding corridors, down stairways older than any king, until the air turned hot and the stone beneath his feet glowed faintly red. He found the cavern by instinct. It was vast as a cathedral, its ceiling lost to shadow. At its center lay a pit filled with molten rock, and above it hung a single shape, suspended in the air by heat alone. A sword. Its blade was black as glass, its edge rimmed with green fire. The hilt was wrought in the shape of wings, and its pommel bore a stone that pulsed like a living heart. Aemon stepped closer. The heat seared his skin, but he did not stop. As he reached for the hilt, a voice spoke from the dark. "You came at last." The boy turned. From the shadows stepped a man, tall, silver-haired, his eyes gold and bright. His cloak shimmered with embers. Aemon's heart leapt. "You're the one from my dreams." The man smiled faintly. "Dreams are how the fire calls its children. I am what remains of it. Once I was Lionel Velaryon. Now I am only what the mountain made me." Aemon's hand hovered over the sword. "What is it?" "The last gift of the flame. The bond between man and dragon, forged anew. It waits for one whose blood remembers." The boy hesitated. "And if I take it?" "Then you wake what sleeps beneath," said Lionel. "The world has grown cold. Fire must rise again." Aemon looked into the pit. Beneath the molten rock, something vast stirred, a shadow moving slowly, serpentine. He felt its gaze upon him, though no eyes were visible. "I'm no king," he whispered. "No," said Lionel. "Kings rule men. You will rule flame." The boy grasped the hilt. Pain exploded through him, pain and light. The sword's fire poured into his body, burning through bone and blood. He screamed, but the scream turned to a roar. Green fire burst from his eyes and mouth, and the cavern filled with wind. The shadow beneath the molten rock rose. The lava split apart, and from it emerged a dragon, black and vast, its wings dripping with liquid flame. Cannibal reborn, or perhaps his ghost. The creature bowed its head before the boy. Aemon stood trembling, the sword still blazing in his grip, his hair whipped in the heat, his eyes now golden as the sun. Lionel watched him in silence, pride and sorrow mingled upon his face. "You are the flame's heir," he said. "Its memory, its hunger, its mercy. The world has forgotten what it means to fear the sky. Remind them." The boy mounted the dragon. Its scales burned his legs, but he did not falter. With a single beat of its wings, the beast rose through the cavern, shattering stone, bursting into the night sky. Fire trailed behind them like a comet's tail. From driftmark to Dorne, men saw the light and fell to their knees. The maesters recorded it as an omen, the priests called it heresy, and the small folk whispered the name that passed like wildfire from shore to shore. The Fireborn. Lionel watched from the mountain's mouth until the light vanished into the clouds. He turned back to the pit where the heat still glowed faintly and whispered to the shadows, "Fire remembers." And somewhere far above, among the stars, a dragon's roar answered. So began the new age of flame, not of kings and thrones, but of wings and wrath. The age when men learned once more that dragons may die, but fire, once born, is eternal. When the Fireborn rose, the world trembled. Across the narrow sea, in the free cities, sailors swore they saw a second sun blazing over Dragonstone, green and gold entwined. In King's Landing, the bells of the Great Sept rang by no mortal hand, and the maesters whispered of omens older than faith. Yet none could name the power that had awakened, for men of peace forget the language of fire. But the dragons remembered, from the shadowed corners of the world, from smoking craters in Valyria, from hidden isles where the ruins of old hatcheries still steamed. Faint roars began to echo once more. Eggs long thought cold began to stir. In their shells, small hearts beat again, awakened by the fire's call. And at the heart of it all, upon his black-winged steed, Aemon the Fireborn circled the skies above Dragonstone, a boy no longer. The sword in his hand pulsed with living flame, its edge burning so bright it carved a path through the clouds. He had become one with the wind and heat. When he spoke, dragons heard. When he dreamed, the mountains themselves listened. But power, even born of destiny, is never without hunger. In those days, Westeros was ruled by a weary king, childless and sickly, who trusted his maesters more than his own blood. When word reached him of a dragon seen above the narrow sea, he dismissed it as madness. Yet his dreams began to haunt him, dreams of wings blotting out the sun, of a boy with golden eyes calling his name from the storm. At last, he sent riders to Dragonstone. None returned. The sea that year was restless. Ships that sailed too near the isle were found days later adrift and burned, their crews gone. The lords of the realm began to whisper of prophecy, of a dragon returned, and a flame that would consume kings. And so the king, desperate, summoned the faith. The High Septon decreed that fire was sin reborn and named the Fireborn heretic, an abomination forged of Valyria's curse. The banners of the Seven were raised, and warships set sail for Dragonstone, bearing the flame of faith to quench the flame of dragons. Aemon watched them come. From the cliffs, he saw the Armada's lanterns glitter upon the sea, 1,000 lights crawling toward him like a swarm of fireflies. Shadowflame, the reborn dragon, black as midnight and vast as the mountain, crouched behind him, restless, the air around its nostrils shimmering with heat. "They bring fire to destroy fire," Aemon said, voice calm, though his blood sang like the forge. But theirs is a borrowed flame. They have forgotten the source. Lionel stood beside him, older now than any mortal man had right to be, his face carved with the lines of time and heat. The gold had faded from his eyes, replaced by the dull glow of embers. "Do not meet faith with wrath," he said. "Their fear is ancient and blind. It will burn itself out if left to die in its own smoke." But Aemon shook his head. No. They would bind the world again. They would chain flame to stone. The dragons did not die for that. He lifted the black sword, its edge shimmering with green fire. Let them remember. Before dawn, the armada reached the island's edge. Priests upon the prows of their ships sang hymns to the Seven, their voices carried by the wind. Then the sea heaved. The water around them began to boil. The first cry came from the ship nearest the shore, a shriek swallowed by flame. Then another and another as the sea erupted in pillars of fire. From the smoke rose the shadow of shadow flame, its wings unfurling like night reborn. Aemon rode upon its neck, his sword blazing. The Faith's fleet broke before him like twigs in a storm. Fire met fire, torches flung in desperation, prayers shouted into the roar. But no prayer could silence what had woken in the deep. When the dawn came, the sea was red, and Dragonstone's cliffs gleamed like molten glass. The warships were gone. Only one vessel returned to King's Landing, charred, its sails torn, its hull blackened. Its lone survivor was a Septon, blind and burned, who spoke of a boy with eyes like the sun and a dragon that glowed with the color of the comet. "The fire is not of gods nor men," he whispered. "It remembers only itself." The king died 3 nights later, his heart stopping in his sleep, and with his death, his kingdom unraveled. Across the realm, rumors spread of Aemon's fire sweeping across the sea, lighting the night like a dawn that would never end. But the truth was stranger than rumor. Aemon did not seek to conquer. He flew from coast to coast, and wherever his shadow passed, the old dragon bones stirred beneath the earth. At Dragonmont, the fires flared anew, and in the ruins of Valyria, eggs cracked open to the cry of thunder. Lionel watched from the mountain's heights. "It begins again," he murmured, but there was sorrow in his voice. For every egg that hatched, a village burned. The dragons that rose were wild, not bound by man, not tamed by word or blood. They hunted by instinct and rage, and Aemon's control grew weaker with each passing moon. At last, he returned to Dragonstone, weary and afraid. "What have I done?" he asked. "I sought to awaken the fire, but it devours everything it touches." Lionel placed a hand upon his shoulder. "You have done what all fires do. You have lived. I cannot stop it. You are not meant to. Flame consumes. Flame renews. If you would end its hunger, you must feed it one last time." Aemon understood. That night, he climbed to the mountain's peak with Shadow Flame beside him. The sky above blazed with stars, and the wind smelled of salt and ash. Lionel watched from below as boy and dragon stood before the volcano's mouth, their forms haloed in green light. Then Aemon raised his sword one final time. "I am the fire's heir," he said, "and I return to its heart." He drove the blade into the mountain. The world split open. A column of green flame rose so high it scorched the clouds. The sea boiled. The sky wept molten rain, and the roar of the volcano drowned every prayer and curse alike. When it ended, Dragonstone was gone, swallowed by the sea. Only a circle of blackened water marked where the island had stood. In the years that followed, no one dared sail those waters. Yet on calm nights, sailors claimed to see a shimmer beneath the waves, a light gold and green, moving slow as the tide. They say it is Aemon, still bound to his dragon, still carrying the fire beneath the sea. They call it the heart of the mountain, and they whisper that one day it will rise again, when men grow cold and faith grows brittle, when the world forgets the taste of flame. For fire sleeps, but never dies, and in the depths the Devourer and his heir burn still, dreaming of the sky. The realm learned to live without dragons again, or so men told themselves. The seas grew calm, the skies clear, and the memory of green fire became only a story whispered in inns when the candles burned low. But there are some places where memory itself is alive, where the bones of the earth keep dreaming. The waters that swallowed Dragonstone did not cool. They steamed even in winter, and the sailors who dared pass too near said the sea hissed beneath their keels like the breath of some sleeping beast. On moonless nights, the mist above the waves glowed faintly, as if the sun were buried beneath the sea. The Meisters called it a wonder of nature, a vent of heat from the old volcano. The small folk called it something else. They called it the heart of fire. Years became decades, and the kingdoms rose and fell as they always had. The sons of kings spilled each other's blood for thrones that would crumble, and the old songs of dragons faded into myth. Yet every generation, one child was born along the narrow sea, with hair the color of ash and eyes like beaten gold. The villagers called them fireborn and feared them. Most were drowned before their first year, cast into the waves to cool the curse. But now and again, one survived. In the 179th year after the vanishing of Dragonstone, a storm unlike any other swept the coast. Lightning raged for 9 nights, and the sea glowed green with fire from beneath. When the storm at last broke, the people of Driftmark found a child upon the beach, a boy of perhaps 3 years, unburned though wrapped in smoking seaweed. His cries were not the cries of men. They brought him to the castle of House Valerion, for the babe bore their silver hair, though no one claimed him. The Meister who examined him found upon his breast a faint mark, shaped like a dragon's wing. The child was given a name out of pity and tradition both. They called him Raynor. He grew in secret, for the Lord feared the whispers of witchcraft. The boy was quiet, pale and watchful, with eyes that gleamed brighter when storms rolled in. He did not speak his first word until his 6th year, and when he did, the hearth in the hall flared green for an instant. The Lord forbade torches near him after that, but Raynor did not fear fire. He played with the embers as other children played with sticks, shaping them into fleeting figures that danced and vanished. He dreamed always of the sea, of a mountain burning beneath the waves, and of a voice calling his name from the deep. By his 15th year, he could no longer ignore it. One dawn, before the household woke, Raynor climbed from his chamber window and made his way to the cliffs. The wind was wild, carrying the scent of salt and ash. Below him, the sea churned, boiling faintly though no storm blew. He whispered to it without knowing why, "I am here." The waves answered with a sound like breathing. Drawn by some ancient pull, he found a narrow path winding down to a hidden cove. The rocks were warm beneath his feet. The tide had drawn back, revealing a mouth of stone where the water hissed and steamed. A tunnel, leading down. He entered. The air grew thick, heavy with heat. Faint green light danced along the walls, veins of living flame within the rock. As he descended, the sound of the sea faded, replaced by a slow, deep rhythm, like the beating of an enormous heart. The tunnel opened at last into a cavern vast as a temple. The walls glowed softly, and at its center lay a pool of molten water, shimmering gold and emerald. Within its depths, something immense moved, coiled and sleeping. Raynor. The voice came from everywhere, the air, the stone, the fire itself. He fell to his knees. Who calls me? Your blood, your flame, the memory that made you. The molten pool stirred, and from it rose a shape, not holy dragon nor holy man. Its wings were made of mist and light, its face shifting like smoke, yet its eyes burned gold. Raynor knew that face. He had seen it in his dreams. Lionel Velaryon, he whispered. The spirit smiled faintly. The name is Ash, but the flame remains. You are its heir. I am no dragon, Raynor said, trembling. I am flesh. Flesh is only what flame wears until it remembers itself. The pool surged, and for a moment Raynor saw beneath its surface, saw cities of black stone and rivers of fire, dragons gliding through the dark water, their scales gleaming like emerald glass. He saw Eamon the Fireborn standing beside a vast shadow with eyes of wildfire, their forms bound together in light. The fire sleeps, said Lionel's voice, but it waits for one to wake it again. Why me? Because you are born of its echo, you are its last breath, and the world grows cold. As he spoke, a tremor ran through the cavern. The molten pool began to churn. The heat grew unbearable, and the air itself seemed to burn with green fire. Raynor stumbled back. I cannot. You must. The age of men has forgotten what it means to fear the sky. Remind them. The light engulfed him. The fire poured into his lungs, his veins, his bones. He screamed, but the scream became a roar. When the light faded, the cavern was empty. Only the molten pool remained, glowing brighter than before. That night, the sea boiled again. Fishermen saw the waves split apart, and from the deeps rose a dragon, vast and black, its wings wreathed in green flame. Upon its back rode a figure clothed in light, his hair pale as moonfire, his eyes blazing gold. He circled once above the sea, then soared into the clouds. By morning, word had spread across the realm. The maesters denied it, of course. They always did. But the small folk gave the apparition a name, as small folk always do. They called him the Flame Reborn. For years after, strange lights danced along the coast whenever storms came, and ships that strayed too close vanished without a trace. On certain nights, when the clouds were torn and the moon lay hidden, watchers from the mainland swore they saw a glow far out upon the horizon, the glow of a mountain that no longer existed, burning green beneath the sea. And sometimes, if the wind blew just right, a sound would drift across the water. Not thunder, not waves, the sound of wings. The bards say it is the spirit of Lionel Velaryon keeping watch over his heir. The priests claim it is the wrath of the gods. The maesters say it is only the groan of the earth, remembering its youth. But the old sailors, who know the taste of salt and fear, tell a different tale. They say that fire cannot die, and dragons cannot drown. They say that when the world grows cold and kings forget the cost of power, the mountain beneath the sea will rise again. And on that day, the Flame Reborn will fly once more above the narrow sea, his wings blotting out the stars. For though the ashes may settle and the waves may cool, fire remembers. Winter had come again to Westeros, a slow and patient death that crept through the land like a shadow. The seas froze along the northern coast, the forests groaned under their burden of snow, and the sky lay cold and empty, its stars dim and watchful. Yet far to the southeast, where the narrow sea still rolled and fumed, the air was never still. Even in the bitterest cold, A faint warmth clung to those waters, a whisper of fire that refused to die. The sailors still avoided the place where Dragonstone had once stood. It was a forbidden circle of black water, steaming faintly in the heart of winter's grasp. They called it the wound of the world, for it bled heat while the rest of the sea slept. Sometimes, when the mists parted, a shimmer of green light flickered below the waves. Few dared look long enough to be sure. It was said the gods themselves had buried the island for fear of what slept beneath. And yet, every few generations, someone felt the call to seek it. In the 188th year after the fall of Dragonstone, that call came to a girl named Nera Waters, a fisher's daughter born in the shadow of Driftmark's cliffs. She was small and quiet, with hair white as frost and eyes too pale to name, neither gray nor blue, but a color between flame and ash. The other children called her Driftborn, for her mother had found her floating in a broken skiff after a storm, with no mark of parentage save for a pendant of black glass hanging from her neck. The glass never grew cold. Nera was raised among salt and nets, learning the rhythm of the tides, the smell of storms, the ways of wind and current. But she never feared the sea as the others did. When tempests came, she would stand barefoot upon the shore, watching the lightning dance across the water, her hair streaming like a pale banner. She said she could hear voices in the thunder, voices calling her name. Her mother forbade her to go near the water at night. "The sea remembers what it claims," she would whisper, "and fire always seeks its kin. But blood will answer blood." On her 17th winter, a storm unlike any she had known fell upon Driftmark. The waves climbed higher than the cliffs, green fire flashing within their depths. Boats shattered upon the rocks like toys. The air reeked of brimstone. And through the heart of the storm, Nera heard a voice, deep, distant, and old as the earth. "Come home." When dawn broke, she was gone. No one saw her take the boat, nor how she managed to row into the tempest. The sea should have devoured her, yet the waves parted around her as she sailed toward the mist. Hours passed, or days, for time itself seemed to falter, until at last she came to a place where the sea steamed and the sky glowed faintly green. There, beneath the churning water, she saw it. The ruins of Dragonstone, veiled in light, towers of black stone half swallowed by the deep, their shapes shifting as if alive. A pulse of warmth beat upward through the waves, steady as a living heart. She let the boat drift. When it reached the circle's center, the sea opened. Nera did not fall. She sank slowly, the water around her turning to light. Her lungs did not burn. Her body did not freeze. It was as if she had been welcomed home. Below her, the mountain glowed. Within its heart, she saw movement, a shape vast and coiled, its wings folded like the roots of the world, scales black as obsidian, eyes burning gold. The dragon slept. She reached toward it, the pendant of black glass at her throat glowing brighter. When her fingers brushed the molten water, the dragon's eyes snapped open. The sea roared. In that moment, the mountain remembered. Fire poured upward, shattering the surface. The sea boiled and rose in pillars of steam. Sailors on Driftmark cried out as the horizon turned gold and green, and from the depths of the narrow sea rose a shape long thought dead, the island itself, reborn in flame. Dragonstone lived again. At its summit, amid the eruption's fire, stood a girl cloaked in light. Nera Waters no longer. Her hair burned like white flame, and her eyes gleamed gold as the dragons beneath her. The pendant at her throat had melted into her skin, its glow pulsing with her heartbeat. Before her, the black worm unfurled his wings. He was vast, ancient, terrible. But in his gaze there was no hunger, only recognition. "Who am I?" she whispered. The dragon's voice filled the air and the sea and the very bones of the world. "You are Flame's daughter, the seed of what was, the promise of what will be. The Fireborn's blood runs in your veins." As he spoke, the clouds above split apart, and for the first time in 100 years, the sun touched Dragonstone's peaks. Its light shimmered upon the dragon's scales, turning black to gold. "Why have I been called?" Nyra asked. "Because the world grows cold once more," the dragon said. "Men have forgotten fear. They build their thrones upon ashes and call themselves gods. But fire remembers. You are its memory." She looked down upon the sea, where ships fled in panic, their sails aflame from the storm's edge. "Will they not hate me?" "They will, but hatred feeds the flame as well as love." The dragon lowered his head, his breath washing over her like wind from the forge. "Will you take the fire as your own and wake what sleeps beneath the world?" Nyra closed her eyes. She felt the warmth of the mountain beneath her feet, the heartbeat of the earth echoing in her chest. When she spoke, her voice was not her own, but that of every flame that had ever burned. "I will." The sky split open. Lightning poured downward, green and gold, and the world shook with a roar of wings. When the light cleared, the dragon and the girl were gone. Only a storm of ash and fire remained, circling the reborn mountain. For days, the sky above the narrow sea glowed with an otherworldly light. The Meesters argued and the lords prayed, but the small folk simply pointed and said, "The fire has returned." In time, the flames subsided. The mountain cooled. But the sea around Dragonstone stayed warm even in winter, and travelers swore they could see a shadow moving across the sky on cloudless nights, sometimes the shape of a dragon, sometimes a woman with wings of light. And in the darkest hours before dawn, when all the world was silent, the winds carried a whisper that sounded like the beating of vast wings. Fire remembers, and so do we. Thus the age turned again, as it always must, from ash to flame, from death to rebirth. For though the faces of the Fireborn change with every generation, the memory of dragons is eternal. And somewhere deep beneath the sea, where the bones of mountains sleep, the heart of fire beats still, waiting for the world to forget once more, so that it might be reminded. The sea had swallowed the sun. Evening fell upon the narrow sea in hues of iron and ember, and the air was heavy with salt and smoke. Far from the eyes of kings and meisters, Dragonstone stood once more, risen from its watery tomb like a god recalling his own name. Its cliffs gleamed with veins of molten gold, and from the mouths of its towers poured thin plumes of steam. The waves hissed where they touched its shore, as though scalded by the heat that still lived in the island's heart. The world called it a miracle. The faithful named it a curse. To the meisters, it was a mystery beyond measure, and to the small folk, proof that dragons had not truly died. Ships gathered at a cautious distance, crews whispering of a pale queen crowned with flame, who walked upon the black sands and spoke to the sea as though to an old friend. That queen was Nyra Waters. A year had passed since she had been swallowed by the waves. The girl who had vanished from Driftmark's shore had returned as something more and something less. Her skin bore the faint shimmer of scales where light touched it. Her eyes glowed like twin suns in the dusk, and her voice carried the soft hum of the forge. Men who beheld her fell silent, for she looked upon them not as a mortal woman might, but as fire looks upon the wood it means to burn. and above her always was the dragon, the great black worm whose wings darkened the sky, whose roar split the heavens. The Meisters called him Cannibal Reborn, though Nyra knew that name was wrong. "He is not the Devourer," she said. "He is Memory." She named him Vermeer, the word of flame, and the bond between them was stronger than blood. They were one will, one heart, one breath of fire shared between two beings. Under her gaze, Dragonstone lived again. The molten rivers that had cooled for a century began to run, slow and deep. The great doors of the fortress unsealed themselves, and from the ashes of the stables rose creatures that should not have been, half-formed, smoking things, the beginnings of new dragons. The island thrummed with a pulse that matched the beat of Nyra's own heart. But peace cannot dwell where flame is born. The world beyond trembled. When the first light of green fire touched the horizon, the king in King's Landing sent word to the citadel. The Meisters counseled caution. The faith called for holy war. "If the flame has returned," said the High Septon, "then we must quench it, lest the realm burn anew." So the king raised his banners and sent his fleet eastward. They came in their hundreds, galleys from Gulltown, longships from the Arbor, even the Ironborn, lured by promises of gold and glory. Their sails darkened the sea like crows before a storm. Behind them rode war and the faith of men in their own dominion. Nyra watched them from the heights of Dragonstone. The wind tore through her white hair, her eyes shone with firelight. At her side, Vermeer's breath rolled from his nostrils in clouds of smoke. "They come to put out the sun," she murmured. The dragon's voice answered within her mind. "Then let them learn that the sun cannot be drowned." When the first ships reached the shore, the sea turned against them. Steam erupted from beneath their keels, and waves rose like walls. Some fled, others pressed on, their priests chanting prayers to the Seven. But the prayers melted in their mouths as the mountain roared. Nyra lifted her hand. The air itself caught fire. 1,000 arrows were loosed, and everyone burned to ash before it reached her. The ships drew closer still, the bravest among them firing their siege scorpions. The bolts struck the rocks and vanished into steam. Then Vermeer leapt from the cliffs. The world became flame. The dragon's wings spanned the length of the fleet, and with a single breath, he turned the sea to glass. Fire rolled across the water, devouring wood, flesh, and prayer alike. Men screamed, their voices carried to the heavens like offerings. And when it was done, only the wrecks remained, glowing embers on the dark tide. From the burning waves, Nyra turned her eyes inland toward the kingdoms that had sent their sons to die. "Let them see," she said. "Let them remember what they sought to forget." In the years that followed, no lord dared challenge the Isle. Yet the stories spread faster than flame, of a queen who could command dragons from the deep, of fire that spoke, of dreams filled with wings. Some called her savior, others doom, but all who dreamed of her awoke with warmth upon their faces, as though kissed by light. One night, as the stars shone pale above the smoking mountain, Lionel Valerian came to her in a dream. He was as she had seen him in the molten depths, tall, ageless, his eyes burning gold. "You have done what was written," he said. Nyra bowed her head. "I have brought fire back to the world." "Yes," he said, "but remember what fire is. It gives life, and it takes it. It warms, and it consumes. You are both flame and flesh. Do not let one destroy the other." "How do I know which to choose?" she asked. He smiled sadly. "You will not. That is the curse of those who remember." When she woke, she found the air still glowing faintly, though the dream had ended. Outside, Vermeer lay curled upon the cliffs, his eyes reflecting the stars. He lifted his head as she approached, and she felt his thoughts stir in her mind. "The fire sleeps again," he said. "For now," she answered. They stood together, woman and dragon, watching the horizon. Beyond the sea, the world of men continued, ignorant and content, their hearts lit by candlelight and not by dragon's flame. Yet somewhere in those hearts, in the deepest chambers of dream and memory, the fire still smoldered. Nira knew it would not stay silent forever. Fire never did. When the time came, the mountain would rise again, the sky would burn again, and whether it brought ruin or rebirth would depend not on gods or dragons, but on the hearts of those who dared to remember. As dawn broke, Nira lifted her face to the wind and whispered, "Let them dream of us." Vermeer answered with a low, rumbling roar, soft as thunder. Together they rose into the sky, their shadows passing over the sea like a promise or a warning. Far below, the waves shimmered with faint green light, pulsing like the beat of a hidden heart. The wind carried a whisper across the waters, a sound too soft for most to hear, yet ancient as the world. Fire remembers. And so ended the tale of the Fireborn, of Lionel the Firebound, of Cannibal the Devourer, and of Nira Waters, who carried their legacy beyond the age of men. Yet the story itself did not end, for stories are embers. Even when buried, they wait for the breath that will wake them again. Someday, when the world grows cold and the stars fade, Dragonstone will stir once more. The sea will boil, the mountains will speak, and the sky will open its heart to wings of flame, and the world will remember.